Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
And my name is Dyl. Guess what time it is? Draft time. We are continuing our favorite series, and I can't believe this is draft number 12 coming up right here. We've been doing this for a while.
Number 13, actually.
Number 13, wow.
It's number 13.
Okay, 13. Well, even better. Today's draft, though, is something I think really interesting. We are not drafting the best director nominees because there's only 5 of those. And we're not drafting best picture nominees because we're going to do that next week after we finish rewatching all of them. So what we're going to do is draft the directors who directed the best picture nominees but their entire filmography. So people like Spielberg, James Cameron, they have a lot. On the other hand, people like Edward Berger or Sarah Polley who may not have as much but still have really good stuff under the belt so far.
So yeah, I mean, this is going to be a really interesting draft between the two of us because I think that there's a lot of different ways you could go in picking filmographies that have a lot of impact. And Dylan, I think you just barely beat me on this one, which
Yep.
I am on a serious streak of losing, and
Hey.
I'm worried about this week too.
This is a game of runs, it seems like. I started off hot, you won a bunch in a row, and now I'm catching back on fire again. But yes, the MCU draft, this is what's really important about this. If you listen and you have a take, vote. This was probably one vote off from who was first and who was second.
Yeah.
Because it was 52 to 48%. So that last person who voted was really the tiebreaker here. However, with all that being said, first overall pick, I mentioned before, there's 2 people here. You can either go with option 1A or 1B. But to me, 1B is more consistent than 1A. 1A has a lot of great stuff under their belt, but they also have some misses. To me, 1B, they've never missed, and that is James Cameron.
I was hoping you'd pick him, but tell me what is it about James Cameron's filmography, and highlight some of his hits that you've loved.
I mean, just recently, if you've been a cinema goer since September of 2022, he's had 3 movies go to the cinemas. They are Avatar, the biggest movie of all time, Avatar: The Way of Water, a Best Picture nominee from this past year, very beloved, and the number 3 highest grossing movie of all time. And most recently, 2 weeks ago, re-released in the theaters, what most people consider to be, maybe not most, but what a lot of people consider to be one of the best movies ever put to film, Titanic. So, he's got the big 3. On top of that, he reinvented the horror genre with Aliens, showing like, hey, you can do horror and do it big. He had Terminator 1 and 2, really reinventing the whole action genre. And before he did Titanic, before he did Avatar, he went deep under the water with The Abyss. He's got such a wide variety, which I feel like any type of film fan can find something in here. And as I just mentioned, that's a lot of movies and not many misses there.
You are right. James Cameron is one of the greats in cinema. He's made so many films that are just so goddamn incredible. He's a name that I think will always be known, not just as a great filmmaker, but as a technical innovator, because he reinvents everything every time he works. But you said it, there's 1A, 1B, and I have to go with Steven Spielberg as my first pick here, because Steven Spielberg is cinema. I think when people talk about Hollywood blockbusters, they're talking about Steven Spielberg. He is maybe the only household name who's a director. He's someone that everyone knows, and it's because he's made films across all genres. Yes, maybe not the most consistent. He's made a few duds, but across all genres, he has always made some of the most iconic movies of all time. I'm talking, if we're talking sci-fi, he's got Jurassic Park, he's got AI, he has E.T. If we're talking action, he has Saving Private Ryan, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the rest of the Indiana Jones movies, as well as Minority Report, which is also sci-fi. If we're talking horror, he has Jaws, and drama, oh my god, I mean, The Fabelmans, Schindler's List, the list goes on and on, even one of the greatest musicals of all time. Every genre that we see as like the biggest genres now, Spielberg has probably directed one of the 5 most iconic movies in that genre. And that's why I've got to pick him. There is no one who has done more for the cinematic medium than Steven Spielberg. He is a master, and he is truly, truly the GOAT If we just are looking for one single GOAT, it's Spielberg.
Fair enough.
So for my next pick, I have to go with Martin McDonagh.
Ooh, interesting.
And the reason that I'm going with Martin McDonagh is consistency. He might not have the largest filmography, but really, outside of Cameron and Spielberg, who does have a large filmography? You know, this Martin McDonagh has made 4 films now, and all of them are really great. I mean, there's In Bruges, 7 Psychopaths, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and The Banshees of Inisherin. That is 4 consistent movies right there. My favorite has to be 3 Billboards, but truly, it is consistent, and his style speaks through all of these, right? There's a consistent style that we can see across every single one of these films, and that's why I gotta go with him. Outside of that, I'd also say that he is the best writer that we have here, as seen by his theatrical endeavors, his plays that he's put together, which are also great pieces of art. So my first 2 picks there, Steven Spielberg, Martin McDonagh, and I feel like those are the right 2.
Well, you mentioned style, and there's one director left on the board that has a whole lot of it. Everyone has seen at least one of this guy's movies, whether you saw it in school, you went to the theater yourself, or your parents showed it to you, because that is the one, the only Baz Luhrmann. This year he has Elvis nominated for Best Picture. In the past, he has an adaptation of a book that everyone knows and loves, The Great Gatsby, an adaptation of a play everyone knows and loves, of Romeo and Juliet. He's just had a very illustrious film career, including one of the most original and bombastic musicals ever put to film, and that is Moulin Rouge. So, I feel like everything you fit there from McDonagh, of having a style that you see it and you're like, yeah, that is a McDonagh movie. The same can be said about Baz Luhrmann. Yes, I know he's a very divisive filmmaker, but like we've mentioned in weeks past about M. Night Shyamalan, Baz is someone who's going to do what he wants to do. He doesn't care what the critics think. He doesn't care what his naysayers think. You're always going to get Baz's artistic vision, and it's never going to be changed. And I think that's something that maybe can be said about everyone here that we have left, but I think is most said about my 2 picks so far of James Cameron and Baz Luhrmann. So to pair with them, the rest of this board is kind of the people who don't have as many movies. They kind of have like 3 or less to like really pick from. However, I'm going with directorial visions, where if you watch one of their movies, you really know what you're going to get. And maybe I'm picking these 2 people a little bit early, but their last 2 movies have been so artistic, so creative, and I have to go with our best director winners of this year, the Daniels.
Great pick. Why are you picking them?
I mean, Everything Everywhere All at Once is going to be a trendsetter. It's going to change the landscape of cinema, honestly, in the next few years to come, regardless if it's going to be big budget movies, but especially those smaller to mid budget movies. How to really use your budget and get the most out of it. But on top of that, they're so creative. Swiss Army Man is a topic that you really don't know how you would film it. And they film it in a way that makes it so entertaining and so engaging. Yes, they have other movies that maybe aren't my cup of tea, but these 2 at least show like, hey, they have a vision, they have a style, and they're going to stick towards it. And that's really the theme I'm going with my team so far.
I want to say you forgot the best part of their filmography, the Turn Down for What music video.
You're right. How could I forget that iconic music video? Think about it. Our best director nominees this year, they directed a Little John music video.
And I think it's actually one of the greatest music videos of all time.
Boom.
It's truly
boom. Shower my picks of love.
I will, because Daniels deserve it. So for my next pick, I'm going to go with someone who, before this year, I had never seen any of his movies. And this is someone who I always thought, when I looked at this movie that got a Best Picture nomination, I was like, ooh, that looks like a boring melodramatic romance. I'm not really interested in seeing In the Bedroom. Well, I watched In the Bedroom this year, and it is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen in my entire life. It is basically everything that I thought Manchester by the Sea should have been, was what In the Bedroom is. And then I watched Little Children, and that movie was also absolutely incredible. That was a movie that I also didn't expect much of, and then it came in and it blew me away. And Tar, I might not have loved it the first time I watched it, but after a rewatch, I absolutely love it. I think Todd Field, who is my 3rd pick here, Todd Field has made absolutely 0 missteps. Every movie that Todd Field has made is fucking incredible. He has made only 10 out of 10 movies, and I will stand by that. And that's why he's my pick number 3. For my next pick, I'm going to go with the person I stand the most, with the one director on this list who I have personally spoken to, Sarah Polley, who I just think is the greatest. And, I mean, we've said that these directors at this point haven't made a ton of stuff. Sarah Polley had the unfortunate thing happen where she had a concussion that was so bad that she basically had to take a 10-year break from making movies. And without that, I mean, I think that Sarah Polley would have had multiple Best Picture nominees in this time. And previously, she's made amazing films, Take This Waltz, Away From Her, and especially her documentary, Stories We Tell, which when I saw that movie when I was probably in the 9th or 10th grade, that shattered my perception of what a documentary could be. I think that there is no one better. Honestly, on this whole list, Sarah Polley might be my favorite filmmaker because not only is she someone I look up to as a Canadian who is looking to break into the industry, but she's also just such a tender filmmaker, and that's what shines through in all of her work.
Great picks there. We're left with 3. And of these 3, I can confidently say between these 3, there's only one of these that has 2 Palme d'Ors, and that is Ruben Östlund. Continuing the trend of just visionaries and people who do their own type of thing. You watch a Ruben Östlund movie, you know it's a Ruben Östlund movie. Triangle of Sadness may not have been my complete cup of tea, even though I really liked it, but you can tell there's a style to it. The Square has a super interesting style, and my favorite of his 3 movies, Force Majeure, is one of the best, I think, international movies that I've seen in my lifetime. So, to me, he's kind of the easy pick with the people that we have left, not to knock the other 2, just he has more to work with, essentially. That leaves me with Edward Berger, who All Quiet on the Western Front is the only movie I've seen from him, but there is a style, there's a flair, and I'm really excited to see what he does next. But I am going to go with the other option here of Joseph Kosinski because I love Top Gun Maverick. Oblivion had a very distinct style to it, and Tron Legacy is, I think, a movie that gets a little too much hate. It has a tone, it has a feel, and I think his direction for that movie really works. So to round out my team, I'm going with Ruben Östlund and Joseph Kosinski.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, those are the 2 that make sense because Edward Berger is unfortunately he's the last place pick, and that's not saying anything about his quality of direction because I think his direction on All Quiet on the Western Front is some of the best of the year. He has a clear vision for this film, and his technical talents are unparalleled by most of the other nominees here. Like, that film looks perfect for a war movie.
Well, to recap the directors that we are drafting, keep in mind this is not for their specific work this year. This is for their entire career. That's why our Best Picture frontrunners are going a little bit later, and some people who may be not nominated for Best Director are going at the top, because I did draft James Cameron first overall. Called a controversial pick. Last time I passed on one of his movies in the draft, I lost the draft. I don't want to make the same mistake twice. So I had Cameron, I paired him up with Baz Luhrmann, The Daniels, Ruben Östlund, and Joseph Kosinski. Say what you want about a lot of these people's films. They all have a style, they all have a vision, and you can tell by just popping in one the first 10 minutes, you're watching a movie by that director.
And I picked Steven Spielberg, Martin McDonagh, Todd Field, Sarah Polley, and Edward Berger. And honestly, I feel really great about my lineup. I think that they are all incredibly consistent, and they've all delivered some genre-defining material. And they're all very humanist. I mean, I'd love to see more from Edward Berger, so I'm going to say that my first 4 are really my team, and Edward Berger is kind of just like, I can't wait to see what you do next.
Yes. He's someone who I wouldn't be upset with having, like I mentioned before. It's just the nature of the game. Someone has to go last, but that doesn't mean that you're bad or you're not worthy. No. Very good direction, All Quiet, as we just saw. Yeah. He won the BAFTA.
I just want to see what he does next, because at this point, I feel like I don't know enough about him to really feel confident with him as my team member. But otherwise, I think I've got a great top 4. But we don't decide that. You guys decide. Go to our YouTube community tab and vote. Make sure you pick your favorites, because this comes down to who is going to get next week's first round pick. And next week we are drafting Best Picture nominees. So please go and vote so that we can figure out who gets pick number 1, because pick number 1 next week probably wins, right?
I mean, I think you and I had the same pick number 1 for the draft purposes, so we're kind of the fans out there. Y'all are deciding essentially who gets to have everything ever all at once. So, as Matt mentioned, vote, because it matters. As we saw this week, the vote was down to 1 pick. One vote, turn the tides for who had that first overall pick. So you all can decide who has that next week. But until then, my name is Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and this is Fantasy Filmball.